Thank you for joining us on the Winning at Selling podcast. I'm Bill Helkamp of Reach Development Systems, and with me is Professor Scott Plum of the Minnesota Sales Institute.
Money is a tool and resource to managing your life and career, and your success in either is based on how well you behave with it. Is it skill, luck, guilt, or greed? Open up your purses and wallets as Bill and I discuss your relationship with money and other interesting ideas on episode 549 of the Winning at Selling podcast.
Well, I'm eager to hear your thoughts on this topic, Scott. I know that you talk about how the relationship with money can affect how much you sell and whether you think you're worthy of selling. So I think it can be really interesting. Anyway, before we get to that, folks, we've got the book, What Great Salespeople Do. We're on to chapter 2. From my point of view, I'd say he's still in the setup phase. So we've gone through the introduction, chapter 1 and chapter 2, and now we're still introducing this concept and convincing you that you need to not just use logic anymore, right? So It's called Earth is No Longer the Center of the Universe, and he's talking about breaking down old paradigms or paradigms as you read it, right? So what he's saying is logic is no longer the center of the universe. So all the time we spend on solution selling, helping someone solve a problem, it doesn't take into account the emotional connection that we need to make with them. So did you get the feeling, Scott, that he's saying that solution selling is no good anymore? We don't need it. We just need to talk to the emotions? Or
I think
where are we going here?
It sounds like he's evolving from that, because that was kind of the first area that they concentrated on, the authors, and now they're getting into more of the emotional side. And sometimes it just takes a while to see an evolution within a concept. And I think over the application of the content, they start to see different attributes that they may want to be looking at and considering. And I think that that's what you're seeing here.
I think you've always said that we make decisions emotionally and we justify them rationally. So maybe that's the balance they're starting to look for, is to say, we're going to have to talk to the logic side. And I think there's certain customers. So he used the story of Zuckerberg to show somebody who is totally logical. And I do think that you're going to meet people in your sales world that have much more on the logic side than they do on the emotional side. And I think you have to find both of them. When I teach, they say there's 3 learning styles. There's auditory, there's visual, and there's kinesthetic. And my teaching style is to try to address all of those different areas, not just one of them. But and I think in our selling, we need to talk emotionally and we need to talk logically in order to get all sides of the brain. And that's what he starts to talk about, is the new science of the brain. We are feeling machines that think, and we can't help but react emotionally. He talks about the 3-part structure of the brain: the reptilian brain, which is our original brain. It's built all on survival, the fight or flight, right? The limbic system, which covers that, which is the emotional part of our brain. And that's a very evolved part of our brain, is the limbic system. But then the neocortex is the thinking part of our brain. And that's the late arrival, right? We were survival and emotional first. And what he's saying in this is we can't help but work on the survival and emotional level, even though we want to work on the thinking level more often. So your thoughts on that, Scott?
Yeah. I think it's interesting when you look at how an adolescent, a teenager evolves with their brain development. Their thinking part, neocortex, doesn't really develop until they're like 24 or 26 years old. And you can start to see some of the decisions that they make when they're younger. And then as they get older, they're almost embarrassed when they think back about some of the decisions that they made. Well, their brain just wasn't developed yet. And it was still in the process of evolving and getting that thinking to a level of, how do you survive and be able to go out in the world.
And that's when colleges were supposed to be helping people learn, and now that they just destroy children. So because
your position never changes on
that's
colleges,
right, because colleges are the bane of the world's existence. At least the bad ones that are out there, like Harvard and Ivy League schools and any school I went to. So anyway,
they started off good and they turned bad.
Well, they've decided to become indoctrination centers like the high schools. Anyway, so he does focus on the left brain, analytical, and the right brain is creative. And we've all known ourselves whether we're a little bit more analytical or a little bit more creative. but I think that we, again, it really, for me, it all goes back to we can't always determine what kind of a thinker we're dealing with. Are we dealing with a left brain person or a right brain person? And there's some tells that they have in the questions that they ask and how they examine things, and maybe even looking at their office, we can tell a little bit whether we have a creative person or whether we have an analytical person. But I do think that we are both of those things. And in selling, we need to find ways to attach ourselves and attach the decision both emotionally and logically, both creatively and analytically.
Yeah, I think that there's a difference between the brain and the mind too. And the brain is wired in a certain way. We're all human beings, and our brains are wired certainly in different ways. But our mind is the one that really discerns judgment and what we do and what we don't do and what we say and don't say and when we think and when we don't think. And I think sometimes we don't really develop our mind and understand our brain at the same time. I mean, when I look at a beautiful woman, my brain lights up. It's neurological. It's not anything that I can control or do. It's just the way my brain works.
The only beautiful woman I know is my wife.
And
that's all I know.
I'm still searching for mine, and so that's
why I can use
that example.
I never ever think about other women. So
right.
So in case she listens to this, I want that to be right up front.
There's fight and
Scott's a bachelor. Scott's a bachelor.
Right.
So
I am.
You can let those things happen.
Yeah. So the brain just reacts. And certain areas, our mind, I think, is in a position to respond.
So do you think we kind of fight within ourselves?
Oh,
saying,
absolutely.
okay, I know I'm acting emotionally in this area, but I want to think more logically. I want my mind to take over rather than
we're kind of setting up our topic about money. I think, when it comes to money, we can become very emotional, reactional, and really lack good judgment in those situations.
Well, let's talk about the last two pieces that he identifies, because he identifies three things that we need to understand about the brain. One was left brain, right brain. Second is neuroplasticity, or our ability to create new neural pathways and learn new things. And I've believed in this all my life. I couldn't be a trainer and a teacher if I didn't feel people could learn. But we've heard that old saw, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And I think people don't try to motivate old dogs. I think people can learn, but they do make decisions to not learn. So as I've gone through my life, I've met people who said, boy, once I got out of school, high school or college, whatever it was, I'm never going to read another book. It's like, oh, great. Great. Good for you. Just because college and high school were boring, you're not going to be adventuresome. So, I mean, you and I read a lot. We know a lot of great books, and we know that our attitudes and opinions have been changed over years by reading thoughtful people. So you have to convince yourself that you can continue to learn, and you have that neuroplasticity. But I do think it fades over time, and I think that's not so much ability as desire. As I've gotten older, my desire to change is like, the hell with it.
Right. No, totally agree. I totally agree. I think we do become complacent, and I think
that's a great word.
Nature. Yeah. And our friend Ron Lehman talks about that, and he's always entertaining if you ever have a chance to see Ron Lehman in the Twin Cities. But we do become complacent. We do become tolerant. And when we surrender to both of those, I think we're doomed. I don't think that we're in charge of our future anymore. And, it's unfortunate. And I really believe that change begins with wonder. And if you don't have wonder, there's no reason for you to change. And I know a few people, especially in my family, that have gone to college and graduated, and they thought, well, now I know everything because my college taught me everything and I don't need to know anything more. And it's like, oh, TikTok, I'm sorry, that ain't true.
Yeah, really.
Knock, Puddinhead. I think you need to really consider some other things before you start making that decision. And but there's no wonder. There's no wonder. And it almost begins like a child, where you kind of go through, riding in the car seat, staring out the window and not really understanding anything, to when you get old, you're 86 years old, you're sitting in the car seat, almost looking out the window and just not really understanding things. And it's just amazing how the human being evolves.
Yeah. Okay. And the last piece, third thing that he wants us to understand is the concept of mirror neurons. And that is that we're wired to be empathetic, that when we, and I think in sales, we've all been taught the chameleon technique or the mirroring technique,
right?
And I think that can be overused, right? I don't cross my legs when they cross their legs, but I do try to get on the same pathway as my customer, listening to them, understanding them, talking at the same rate that they talk, or how they talk, so they feel more comfortable, and that I show some empathy toward them, that I ask some questions of understanding, so that I can be more empathetic with them, and I can build a better relationship. I've always talked about how important a relationship is in sales. If they don't like you, it doesn't matter how smart you are. If they get a wild hair about you, it's probably not going to change, and you might as well just let somebody else have that customer, because we are wired to be empathetic. And if they like us, then they're going to be more likely to stay involved with us until we can come to a good conclusion. I don't think we buy because we like somebody, but I do think we stay in the relationship until that buying opportunity is there.
I think it definitely helps when somebody's making a decision if they like you. However, I've made some purchasing decisions where I did not like the salesperson, but I respected their position and what they knew and the process that they put me through to get to where I need to make a decision, yes or no. And I didn't really like the salesperson that I worked with, but I did buy from them. And
yeah, but you said you respected them.
I respected them.
Okay,
because,
so that's a part of empathy.
Yeah,
right. It's a different kind of empathy, but it's an empathy that said, okay, I don't necessarily like this person, but I understand where they're coming from, and I think they're giving me good advice in this, and therefore I will follow them. So maybe it wasn't likability, but it was another type of respect that you developed with them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, good. So he concludes with solving problems is not the answer. And so what is the answer? Well, hopefully we'll start to find out next week. That is chapter 3 of What Great Salespeople Do.
Yeah, and it looks pretty interesting. And I think he's going to start, maybe building it up a little bit more and then start delivering a different perspective. So looking forward to that. So our topic today, as Bill and I set it up at the beginning of the show, is your relationship with money. And, think about the foundation of any relationship is based on expectations. And what are your expectations related to money? I always like to start off talking about money with a topic in a class or a workshop is money is an instrument used to exchange value. So when you start with the concept of money is an instrument used to exchange value, it's having a conversation about value, not about money and not about price. And I think that that's what salespeople need to do is focus more on having a conversation about value and what's most important, and to really put an emphasis on the cost, consequences, and risk of inaction. And that's a salesperson's job to concentrate on that. And I'm sure loyal listeners have heard me say that many, many, many times. So thanks for continuing to tune in. Another topic related to money is budget. And a budget is a predetermined number before a decision needs to be made. When you can go back 3 years.
An English language determination or English language of that is what we thought it would cost.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Or what we hoped it would.
Time.
What we hoped it would. It is what it was last time. But I think what you're going to talk about is that value can overcome budget, right?
Value does overcome budget, and the certain cost, consequences, and risk of inaction, of not doing anything, regardless of what the budget says, will tell you that it will cost you more money if you do not make this decision to find the money within the budget, realign the budget, allocate funds differently, and I think you're going to be able to manage the business and be able to get more profit.
Now, what I might say about that, Scott, is that budget can be overcome with value by a decision maker who values something. But if all they value is the cost and everything's the same, and I'm just going to go for the lowest cost, they're not going to overcome the budget, because you have a buyer that doesn't believe in your value.
Right.
And so I think that's part of the decision. That's part of the sales process, is trying to figure out what this buyer sees as important. And I got to tell you, if all they want to talk about is the cost, I just fold up my book and say, it's really been nice talking with you. I'm sure there's a cheap solution out there that won't work, but you'll be able to pay for it.
Are you referring to the price, Bill? When they just talk about the price and not the cost?
Yeah, okay, the price. Okay,
but I just want to use the vernacular in the right formula.
Yeah, well, you change words all the time.
I do.
Scott.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think we need to understand that if you talk to someone who doesn't value what your presentation values, what your company values, what you put forward, you're wasting your time.
Right.
Unless you think you can change their entire outlook on life.
When you get as a salesperson, when you get in front of that person that's just focused on price, what you're dealing with is somebody who has a mentality of increasing revenue by cutting expenses. What?
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't work. You cannot raise revenue by cutting expenses.
Yeah.
You can increase profit,
right,
but not revenue. And the person that's looking at price and not cost or value, they're trying to increase revenue by cutting expenses. And it's never going to happen. And when a person in a position of managing and leading a company needs to look at the best value, and money is the instrument used to exchange value. So I just want to, reinforce that. But it first starts with a relationship. A relationship is conceptual, and people are raised with three types of relationships with money. The first and most popular is it's not polite to talk about money. So 60% of people were raised with this, mindset or belief it's not polite to talk about money. And it was taught to them during a young, impressionable age by somebody who had a tremendous impact on them. The second belief is that money is scarce, and it's like, what do you think I am, made of money? And then the third one is there's more of that where that came from. And, money grows on trees. And,
so
that
kind
one
of the
is
opposite of they're taught either money is abundantly available or money is scarce.
Right. Yeah. But most importantly, or most commonly, it's not polite to talk about money. And
I think there's more things that we're taught.
Yeah. Okay.
I think we're taught that money is the root of all evil.
Sure.
I think that it's not just not polite to talk about money, but having too much money is bad. You're a bad person if you make a profit. Early in my career, I went to work at a high school to try and teach them how to run a calendar and just do some business things. I thought I would give back to the community. And I got involved with a group at the school, a very intelligent group. And the teacher basically told me at one point that every business cheats people in order to make money. That was her firm belief.
Right.
That every business is stealing from people. That's how they make profits.
Right.
And I said, then what my thought is, every teacher is a lousy teacher who doesn't understand anything about life. And she said, well, that's an unfair thing to say. And I thought, well, then how can you say what you're saying about business if you don't want to believe that every teacher is bad, but you want to believe that? So her thought process, every teacher is good and every business person is bad. Right. And I thought, what are you teaching these young kids who are trying to become successful in life? So I don't think that had anything to do with what I think about high schools. But anyway, we're taught a lot of misconceptions about money and whether it's evil, whether it's good. I think it goes back to what your first statement is. It's just an instrument used to exchange value. It's a null. It doesn't have, having a pile of money sitting on my desk doesn't make me a better or a worse person.
Right.
It gives me options.
It's what money does or what money can avoid that really delivers the value. And I think one of the most important relationships with money, and I wish that I would have learned this at a young age. Oh, I wish I would have learned this as a young age. 2 words, compound interest. And if I would have understood compound interest at a young age, I probably would be retired right now. If I started putting money in when I was 16, 18, 20, and just started doing that, no matter what the circumstances were in my life, I would have generated enough enough income to be able to retire at this point. But compound interest is not taught to people at a young, impressionable age. However, they experience compound interest when they start building up their credit card debt, because that interest accumulates on top of interest daily. And that can become very expensive. So learn about savings and interest at a young impressionable age, and really build on that compound interest. That's just powerful when it comes to money.
Yeah, I think so too. But in order to do that, Scott, here's the number one thing people need to learn. If you spend more than you earn, on the off chance that you'll be making more money in the future, you will always be broke. If you cannot discipline yourself to spend less than you make and have something left over at the end of the, and it's not even a leftover. Basically, if you want to save, you take that 10% out before you start spending. You don't hope that it's left over at the end of the month and I'll invest whatever's left over.
Right.
You take that out of the equation and you live on the remainder. And people will not do that. And as you said, the credit card debt, it's in the trillions, I think, in this country.
It is.
At 18 and 20 and 25% interest. It's madness. It's more than loan shark money costs. And if you're living off credit cards, you are always going to be broke. And if you're taking out loans to pay off your credit cards, you're really going to get in trouble because you're going to take that credit card, fill it up again, and you're still going to have the loan. So be careful about how you spend is going to have a lot to do with it. And I think the challenge with being frugal is then you end up with this kind of idea that money is scarce. And so you're always trying to balance these beliefs that it's important to save, it's important to have money, but then if you're that kind of person, sometimes you're overly frugal and you have a kind of a scarcity mindset that you have to be careful of because, there's never more money coming. Be careful. We always got to save because, and you and I have been in the kind of business where we don't have the luxury of an ongoing paycheck.
Right.
I think the way people look at money in many ways has been governed by our bureaucrats who say, just take your money out every month and here you're going to get this weekly paycheck or every other week paycheck or twice a month paycheck. And they have a paycheck mentality. They've given over their whole life to a corporation who then says, here, I'll dole out money to you. And it's just kind of a weird way to live when you look at historically, people made it on their own. And it's only been the last 200 years we've kind of developed this paycheck mentality that says, I'm going to have somebody give me my money and the government's going to take their cut. By the way, folks, do you notice the government takes their cut first?
Yeah, that's true.
They don't give you the money and then expect you to give it back. They want to take their cut out of the top. And then if you're smart, you'll take your savings out of the next cut. And then you'll spend what's left. But after the government takes their cut, especially in the state of Minnesota, there's not a lot left.
Right. You cannot afford to die in the state of Minnesota. That's why people move. But so I just want to reiterate that very wisely said, Bill, on how people need to be able to be conscious of committing to earning and being disciplined on spending, because I think that's really the formula. And it's so often that we get sucked up into convenience. And it's our motivation as human beings to have immediate gratification. So we go for convenience and we end up spending money on things that are easy, and that's not always the best decision. I was just down in Orlando. I was gone for 30 hours. I did a quick trip down to Orlando and back, and I would not spend $10 for the internet on the plane. I'm like, I'm not going to get caught up on the internet here. I'm just going to relax, listen to some music, do the Sudoku puzzle, and just kind of punch out for a while because nobody can get a hold of me. And I thought, that was a good decision, is to just unplug and not spend $10. And that $10 can add up every time you're in a position of making a decision like that. Now, am I being cheap? Yeah, possibly I'm being cheap, but money is about how you behave. Like I said in the beginning, and it's really focused on what decisions do we make. And there's some smart people that make really, really dumb decisions. And
I think too that, one of the things that's really interesting is how we're told that money doesn't make you happy. Money doesn't make you. Have you heard that one, Scott? Money
plenty of times.
So the assumption is that being broke does make you happy, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Somehow being broke makes you happy. I'll tell you what, being broke doesn't make you happy either. And I've never had somebody who says money doesn't make you happy being a wealthy person. Always a broke person who's justifying their brokenness to say money doesn't make you happy. They're probably right. Money doesn't make you happy. I've never had enough to worry about whether money makes me happy, but I know not having money makes me sad.
Yeah.
And not being able to buy eggs makes me sad.
Right.
And when I don't have money, I think about it all the time. When we're lacking in a resource, we can't help but think about that resource all the time. And it reminds me of when, and I'm going to tell a quick story here. We were driving from Denver to Yellowstone after a wedding. We're driving in a van, and I had, maybe half a tank of gas when we hit Casper. And I thought, we can make it to whatever the next town is. We turned, and we must have turned right into the wind, because that wind in Wyoming is fierce. And I could almost watch the gas gauge go down as we were driving. And it's like 60 miles to the next stop. And my tank is saying I got 100. I'm thinking, okay, that's it. And then all of a sudden my tank's saying I got 80. And now I got, and it's going down faster than the mileage is going down. And all I could think about for the next hour, Scott, was what?
Money.
Do I have enough gas?
Yeah.
Do
gas,
I have
money.
enough gas? Do I?
Yeah.
And when I don't have any money, you know what all I think about is,
right.
How can I get me some money so I can pay my rent, or so I can pay my car payment, or so I can not have to eat top ramen again this month?
Yeah.
And so money may not be the root of all evil, and it may not make you happy, but I'll tell you what, being broke does not make you happy. That's true. In any way, shape, or form.
Right.
And so I think that's something that people have to talk about when they talk about, the resources we have. If we think, once we find out, the doctor says you're going to die in a year, boy, time becomes all you can think about.
Right.
How am I spending this last year? And your car's running out of gas, and the next gas station is 20 miles away, and you got a car full of young kids. You're thinking, oh man, I hope I didn't make a bad decision in Casper, right? So anyway, that's my last thing I want to talk about on money. I'll let you wrap it up for the day.
No, there's some things to think about when it comes with money in a life. Like I said in the beginning, is about your life and your career. So think about certain options that you have available. If you were to choose a career that has a pension, that's related to money. Thinking about how you want to spend retirement and how long you want to work in order to get to that point of retirement, and then be able to do something you enjoy a little bit more. And I think that, when it comes to generations have a different perception about their relationship with money too. So that has an impact. And it seems like the younger generation doesn't concentrate as much on savings. They concentrate more on, personal fulfillment and enjoyment and self-gratification and whatever's convenient. And how much money are we spending on entertainment with all of these different networks and apps, and it can really add up. And I don't think people really measure that as much as they really should. And then all of a sudden they kind of get caught in a situation of, now what do I do? And now they have to start making some lifestyle changes. And again, it's how you behave. So I just want to close with a question, is where I started, is how will you behave when it comes to money? And behave when you don't have enough. How will you behave when you have just enough? And how will you behave when there's never enough? And I would love to have been able to really think about, what is my number? When I'm 18 years old, what is my number that I need to have in the bank in order to feel like I don't ever need to think about money again? And if I would have known that at a younger age, I would have concentrated more proactively on it, and I would have made better decisions in the past had I known more about my relationship with money, which is why Bill and I are talking about it today.
Well, I'm 64, Scott, and I've been thinking about that retirement thing a lot. And the number right now is about $1.5 million. So if you don't have $1.5 million yet, you better start saving up and quit spending money on nonsense.
Yeah. And I don't ever plan on retiring, so I don't need any money to
That's
save.
right. You're going to die. He's going to die right in the middle of a presentation.
I am. I'm going to die of a heart attack, and people are going to look at me going, "Lucky son of a."
That's right. Died on the trail.
Sleep.
All right. Well, I do have a resource I think people will enjoy. It's one of my 2-minute selling tips called The Price Question. And what it's about is when they say, how much does this cost, when you're not ready to tell them.
Yeah. That's a great one, Bill. I hope more people check that out. We'll have that on the show notes.
All right. Our gold nugget for today comes from Will Rogers, the great humorist. Too many people spend money they haven't earned to buy things they don't want to impress people they don't like.
Oh, I think you've used that one before. I love that quote. It's so true on human behavior, is that we just seek the attention of other people so much that we want to impress them.
Well, it's been exacerbated by Twitter and taking photos of where you are, and all the lies that people tell about their lives on social media.
So the 2-minute video will be at our show notes. Go to winningatselling.com. This is episode 549.
And then next week, our book club, What Great Salespeople Do, Chapter 3. I think we're going to start to get into story selling, which I think is what this book is about. And then our topic is, what if they bring up politics?
I'm ready.
All right. Subscribe, share the podcast with your colleagues on your social media sites. Go out and get better one skill at a time.
Joyful selling.